8 years ago, my life quietly came undone. There was no thunderclap, no dramatic revelation in a crowded room. Just a cold, still night when my husband Mark looked at me with eyes that already knew. He had uncovered the truth, my affair with James, my boss. The man I had once promised forever to now stood before me, holding the wreckage of our life in his trembling hands. He had sensed the shift before I could admit it to myself. Those long office hours that stretched later and later, the sudden business trips with flimsy justifications, and the widening silence between us at home. It wasn't one moment that betrayed me, but a slow erosion of trust. When he finally found the emails, intimate, undeniable, damning, he didn't yell, didn't accuse. He simply stared, his silence louder than anything he could have screamed. Then he left. He was gone for 2 days. No calls, no texts. When he returned, he didn't come back to me. He came to collect his things. He packed with the quiet precision of a man who knew there was no saving what had been lost. And just like that, our marriage ended not with a bang, but a broken, wordless goodbye. In the weeks that followed, I disappeared into the shell of my own shame. I took leave from work, James's presence now unbearable, his once charming words bitter on my tongue. I avoided friends, avoided family. Mark filed for divorce swiftly, and I didn't contest it. I knew I had no ground to stand on. I moved into a modest apartment tucked into a quiet neighborhood where no one knew me, where anonymity wrapped around me like a cold blanket. It was a relief, until I realized it was also a punishment. Every quiet evening, every empty room echoed with what I had destroyed. The legal proceedings were simple, no children, no property battles, no fights. But the emotional toll was anything but. Our families fractured under the weight of what I'd done. Friends once shared now chose sides. Most drifted quietly away, unsure what to say. I didn't blame them. Eventually, I returned to work, but not to the same office. I couldn't stay in James's world any longer. Not with the gossip, the knowing glances, the whispered pity. I joined a smaller firm where no one knew my past, hoping for a second chance, a clean slate. But guilt has a way of following you, even into fresh starts. I threw myself into work, determined to outrun the shadows. But no matter how many hours I worked, the ache inside stayed. I started therapy, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't bear the weight anymore. And slowly, painfully, I began to unravel the truth of what I'd done, not just to Mark but to myself. The affair had never really been about James. It was about the cracks I had ignored in our marriage, the disconnection I had buried instead of addressing. James had been an escape, a distraction, not a solution. What I had mistaken for passion had really been avoidance. Meanwhile, Mark moved on. Within a year, he started dating again. And then came Laura, a woman so different from me it stung. She was steady, kind, open-hearted. I heard they were happy, and oddly I was glad. He deserved that. 3 years after the divorce, we saw each other again for the first time. At a mutual friend's wedding, we exchanged polite greetings, awkward smiles. But the weight in his eyes was still there, like an old scar that hadn't quite faded. The encounter left me breathless with guilt all over again. In the years that followed, I deepened my healing. I joined a support group for those affected by infidelity, some who had cheated, others who had been betrayed. Listening to their stories, I saw mine mirrored in 100 ways. I wasn't alone in my mistakes, though that didn't excuse them. The experience had unraveled my identity, and piece by piece, I had to build something new from the wreckage. By the 5th year, I found a kind of peace. I co-founded a small business with a colleague from my new job. A long-delayed dream finally realized. It wasn't redemption, but it was purpose. It gave me something to nurture, to believe in. Something that belonged wholly to me. Around that time, I heard Mark and Laura were engaged. The news brought a rush of emotions. Joy for him, sorrow for myself, and a dull ache for the life I had once imagined. A few months later, they welcomed a child. I sent a simple congratulatory card, not expecting a response. But one came. Mark reached out suggesting coffee. Not to rekindle anything, he made clear, but to talk, to close the loop. We met on a rainy afternoon, years older, and worlds apart from the people we had once been. Our conversation was gentle, reflective. He told me the affair had shattered him, but that with time, he'd come to see our failure as shared. that he regretted not seeing my unhappiness sooner. He didn't say it to absolve me, and I didn't take it that way. But it softened something, reminded me that pain too can be mutual. He said he'd forgiven me, not for my sake, but for his own, for his peace, for his family. We parted with a quiet understanding, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. Today my business thrives beyond anything I imagined. I've started dating again, slowly, carefully, with more awareness of who I am and what I need. I've learned that true happiness isn't a thrill you stumble into. It's a choice, a commitment, a practice. The affair was the worst mistake of my life. But in destroying everything, it forced me to confront truths I had long buried. It made me accountable not just to others, but to myself. I'm not the woman I was 8 years ago, and I'm grateful for that. The past will never stop echoing, and my choices still follow me like shadows at dusk. But time has dulled the sting, and while I lost a marriage, I gained something I never expected: clarity, humility, and the strength to become someone better. Sometimes the most painful endings are the only way to begin again.